All right, so we're gonna record tonight's meeting. Everyone should have got that notification there, just beefed up. All right, so we're gonna open the meeting. It is 6:02.
Do we need to, with the opening, sorry, I thought you had already opened it. Did we need to go through the governor's notice for this meeting?
Yeah, does anybody have that handy?
I do not have that handy, David. Do you have that on your?
Let me
Side?
find it. All right, so pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12th, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 18, and the Governor's March 15th, 2020 order imposing strict limitations on the number of people that may gather in one place, this meeting of the Hubbardston ARPA Advisory Committee will be conducted via remote participation to the greatest extent possible. Specific information and general guidelines for this remote participation by members of the public and or parties with a right or requirement to attend this meeting can be found on the town website. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings in real time via Zoom. In the event that we are unable to do so despite best efforts, we will post on the town's website a comprehensive record of proceedings after the meeting.
Thank you, David.
You're welcome.
Okay, so the first item we have is our approval of the minutes from December 29th. Has everyone had a chance to take a look at those?
Yep.
Yeah.
Does anyone have any recommended or requested changes?
No.
Could I get a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Okay, it's a motion by Mike to approve the minutes, second by Susan. All in favor? I think we need to do a roll call vote because we're remote. Susan,
Yes.
Mike,
Yep.
Chris,
Which one?
I'm sorry. How about we go with Christopher Monroe?
Yes.
Chris?
Yes.
Okay, and Heather, yes. All right, so the minutes from December 29th are approved. All right, next we have open session. And let me see if I have anyone here. I do not show anyone coming in outside of that. David, you haven't heard of anyone else who wanted to attend either, correct?
Correct.
All right, so we have no one for open session. So now we move on to our business review and approval of documents. So I listed out the two pieces here.
I have an open session comment.
You do, go ahead.
Going forward, please refer to me as KP to avoid confusion between the two Chris's.
I think we can do that, Chris. KP, I'm sorry, KP.
Thank you.
So who
Will
gets
do.
put on KP duty?
That sounds more exciting. Okay, all right, so we have these documents we had talked about last time. David was able to find us a couple examples. I think I only sent out one application draft. It was the one that David had put together in Excel. I think I had trouble getting the other one over, which was the sample document that Fitchburg was using for the ARPA pieces, but I want to actually put that aside for a moment and go to the request for proposals. I had sent along the Fitchburg request for proposals. Did everyone get a chance to take a peek at that document?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. KP, did you get a chance to look at that?
I did.
Okay, excellent. What I thought might be interesting to do tonight, since we want to try to still stick to about an hour's time, is I think the request for proposal has a lot of pieces that, you know, we had talked about some of them last time, including on page 4, it actually talks about different criteria that you can judge the projects by. And I was thinking that, that might come in handy for us, where we were discussing last week about the need to have backup information and to support why we would, put one project ahead of another, as well as it kind of lines up with some of the things that I think the committee was talking about that were important, including long-term planning, and, where the ARPA funds would be the sole source and the only available source for funding for some of these. So if the committee would be okay with this, I was thinking what we could do is go through briefly the request for proposals and talk about the large components of the document, see if this looks like something that we can use and if we should use it. And then if we get through that piece, I was thinking we could spend some time looking at the criteria, because I think that's where we would want to spend a good portion of our time, and perhaps even have a draft of something to send to the select board for their criteria on Monday to see if they're on board with the same pieces. How does everyone feel about that plan?
I like it.
Sure.
Yeah, that sounds fine.
Okay.
Can I ask a
Mike?
question about,
Sure.
ask a question about the request for proposals?
Sure.
I read through the literature and I don't see where, like, where do you apply? Do you apply to the town where your business is in? Or do you apply where the town you live in? If you own a business that's in a different town? Or do you apply in both towns? Are you allowed to double dip that way? How does that work?
I think that's a great question, KP. I think what we could probably do is, I didn't see it specified in there. My guess
did I.
is the intent of ARPA is for it to benefit the town itself. So, David, has this come up in any discussions you've had with other towns or any of the materials you've seen or trainings?
No, it hasn't. I would think that the applicant should apply to one town or the other, not multiple applications.
Well, the
Well,
project,
I would think that also, but is there any criteria that dictates they have to do that? Because, if you're allowed to double dip, I'm sure people are going to try to double dip.
well, the point is that the project has to benefit the town. So there, I don't know how there could necessarily be double dipping unless the applicant is active in more than one town, number one. But number two, this request for proposals from Fitchburg is asking only public agencies and registered nonprofits to apply. So no for-profit businesses are involved in this process, at least in Fitchburg.
Okay.
I think to answer that question, we should look at the interim final rule itself. I would hope there would be some guidance there.
Okay, and we can take a look at that. All right, so any other general comments about the RFP? I mean, we can go through this in different pieces, and I think Susan, you just brought up a really good point as to who we want to make eligible to applying for this, including, do we want to include regular businesses? And I think that was something we had talked about last week as part of the intent, or the question of whether or not
Well,
we want to. There was debate.
I'm curious as to, it would be interesting to have an understanding of why Fitchburg limited its request for proposals to just public agencies and registered nonprofits.
yeah, especially when it clearly calls out addressing negative economic impacts caused by the public health emergency, including economic harms to workers, households, small businesses, impacted industries, and the public sector.
Right, but it may be that the intention of Fitchburg is depending on the nature of the nonprofits that are in the community there. They may be in best positioned to take this money and spend it towards those goals.
I
There's
see what
also,
you're saying.
sorry, there's also the obvious difference of Fitchburg has many hundreds of businesses where we have many dozens or some dozens. So it just from an administrative standpoint, it would completely change the situation if we were in a place where we were looking at potentially 1,000 businesses applying.
Okay. All right, so does anyone else have any general comments on this, or do we think we should jump in and give it a go and see what we like and don't like and figure out if there's any follow-ups that we need David to research for us?
I think should just start.
Okay, sounds good, Susan. Good plan. All right, so the request for proposal document on the first page, I think the first section, obviously we'd have to update because it refers to Fitchburg. The proposal details, again, that we would just have to update. I think where we're a little bit different than Fitchburg and we don't have the tech nor the support people to back something up, I think we'd have to have people just submit an old-fashioned hard copy application. David, does that sound right? We don't have any advanced technology access that I'm unaware of, do we?
Yeah, so my general feeling about looking at the RFP from Fitchburg is that we don't want to scare people away who need help. I would be in favor of seeing a much lighter application process.
Okay, but you're thinking just hard copy. We don't have like,
Make it as
fillable
democratic
PDFs.
as possible.
Okay. All right, so we can easily, I think, update that. Then the next section we have is they divide out the difference between non-municipal entities and all applicants. And again, I know Susan and KP, you both mentioned the fact that there's not really a lot of reference to who's eligible, whether it's the business, the nonprofit, the profit. So we'd have to spell that out. But in the meantime, I guess looking at the documentation that they're requiring, do you guys have any initial impressions or thoughts of if there's any sections within the non-municipal entity, meaning, anything that's not submitted by a department within our own government, of documents that we would like to see from people to back things up?
I would be surprised if any of our non-municipal entities have audited financials.
Okay,
That's my
I
first observation.
okay. How do you feel about a financial statement, though?
Absolutely.
Okay. And I think that would cover some of the concern we talked about and that there was concern about last week relevant to, showing that people were stable in their business and they weren't going to go under and so forth. What about other sections in the non-municipal entity? Is there any other section that anyone feels strongly about that would be a good idea, or anything that's not listed there that they think would be great to see from non-municipal entities?
Let me be a little more specific. I doubt that our applicants will have audited financials, but they should produce financials.
Okay. So you would be comfortable with this, with the financial statement, third bullet from the bottom on that list?
No, that's just that's an affidavit that they have 3 months cash flow. The
Okay.
financial audit right above it is looking for an auditor's report and management letter, which they won't have. But what they should produce are a balance sheet and profit and loss statement for the fiscal
Okay.
year ending June 30, 2021. And a lot of them are going to be on the calendar year. And so that'll be interesting.
So for either the calendar or the last fiscal year?
I would ask them for the last fiscal year and for the 6 months ending June 30, 2021. So they can produce 2.
How does everyone feel about that?
Agree.
That's the way to do it. It would
I think
be
it's reasonable.
it'd be unreasonable to ask them to restate their financials to a different year when they're on a calendar year.
Okay. Does anyone else have any thoughts on that? Okay. All right, any other things under the non-municipal entities that we like or that we think we should add? So we have financial statement and the balance sheet profit loss statement for last fiscal year and the 6 months ending June 30th, 2021. Okay, so I'm not hearing anything. So it seems everyone's good with striking the rest of the stuff and just keeping that simple.
Well, as far as the financial statements, do we want the last tax return or something? I'm just trying to figure out if there's an intermediate step between a self-prepared financial statement and an audited financial statement to increase the reliability of it.
Sure, we can ask for tax returns.
Yeah, because those are sworn under pains and penalties of perjury, so.
Yeah, but sometimes it'll be interesting to see if the information on the tax return maps to the internally generated financials. It isn't a line to line item. So it will take a little bit of analysis to look at the tax return and the financial statement and make heads or tails of it, but we'll see what they come back with. I'm wondering if anybody is going to be able to produce an ADA compliance certificate, and the town can't, and a non-discrimination policy.
I don't know. I mean, I think those are very lofty requests, even from Fitchburg. I don't know. I'd be really interested to see if anyone could. I also think that might be too lofty for us to ask for.
It's not a statutory requirement, is it? Sometimes
know.
there are strange things like that for statutory requirements for federal funding.
It might, we can take a look and see. Again, we have to refer back to the interim final rule for answers to this stuff. And some of this may also be directed towards the type of projects they're anticipating hearing about. I'm not allergic to asking town council these questions, rather than trying to figure it out ourselves.
David, how do you feel about that? Do we have the funding to be able to go to them for this?
You can use ARPA fund for that purpose.
Okay.
Well, we also pay them a retainer, so we can spend some of that on this. Right?
Yeah.
I have a quick question around the financial statements, and we're talking about possibly taking in tax returns. Is there any compliance regulation that we would fall under if we, as the committee, received that material? Stuff around ensuring, like, if it's a personal person, it's going to have their social security number on it. That's throwing in a whole bunch of personal information, stuff like that. That starts getting a little hairy.
Well, again, we want to talk about who we are expecting to apply. I don't expect an individual to apply for this. Do you?
Well, right, if they're running their business as not as an incorporated business, but as under their own name, then it's going to contain their personal information.
Are we clear that we are going to allow businesses to apply? Did we agree to that? And did I miss it?
I don't think we discussed that yet tonight, Susan, but I know last week, I think that was part of the conversation, because we do have at least one small business, the Hubtown Diner, who already has asked for funding support.
Right.
So,
Mm-hmm.
Mike is spot on. I
I'm-
think the easiest way to address it is to just ask for them to redact it.
Right.
Because we don't want anything passed around the committee table that has account or social security numbers on it. And I don't think it's going to make a difference in our review process if those lines are blacked out by magic marker. And
I would agree. Yeah, I spent 10 plus years in the security field, so I'm all too familiar with compliance regulations and stuff. So that's why I asked.
yeah, the applications, there's a good argument that those are public documents anyways. They're not going to fall under any exception unless somebody knows of one I'm not thinking of. So that's going to happen to them anyways, because anybody could just go into the town and request to look at them.
Okay. All right, so I think that makes sense. Then we have the tax return redacted. And then the other finance piece, which is the financial statement as well as the balance sheet of profit and loss and the last fiscal year, the 6 months ending June 30th. So with that being said, are there any other sections under that we think we should, any other factors we should consider? Or do you think, actually, you know what, perhaps we should pause for the moment and reconsider who we're asking to apply for this? So the conversation's come up now a couple times, businesses. Now, if Fitchburg doesn't actually include businesses, I know we had talked about it. So as long as it's not excluded under the interim rule, how does everyone feel about including businesses? Would it be safe to say that that is our intent, to allow businesses to apply?
Yes.
Okay, I agree, KP, with you. How does Susan, Mike, Chris, how do you guys feel?
Well, I think it's called out pretty clearly in the document. It sounded basically from what Susan said that Fitchburg might be doing something where they're going to give a chunk of money to some other organization that will then dole it out to different parties, whether those be businesses or what have you. That's kind of what I read into what Susan said, but we're not nearly as big as Fitchburg. I think it's, if the statement says that businesses and such can, that this is intended for that, then I can't see how we can say no.
All right, Susan?
I am agnostic. So if we want to, I think and it's acceptable under the interim final rule, that's fine with me.
Okay. And Chris, do you have any thoughts?
I echo Susan's thoughts on it, I'm pretty agnostic to it. We're going to spend the money either way. But something could come up that is really, really meaningful and really impactful. So
I think we could say that some percentage of the money will be set aside for businesses.
Well, I
So that
think,
we can go towards a bigger project from a town standpoint.
well, I think what we discussed last time was identifying the specific strategic spending that
That Ryan wants to do.
that Ryan had been in favor of, and then I would suggest from that,
Yep, totally agree.
Stating the pool that is available
Totally agree.
for all applicants. Okay.
If I remember part of our conversation last week, I think the other part that came up relevant to this was that we're not sure how many people who's even going to apply yet. So if I remember correct, I think KP was the one who suggested that, before we designate how much money is going to go to what purpose, we really need to wait and see who's applying, because we may only, Hubbardston Town Diner might be the only business in town who actually applies.
Well, right, but we can say it's up to X dollars. Doesn't mean we are committing all X dollars. It's just, that's a cap. That's the most we'd give out.
So I guess the question becomes, you know, a little bit later in this document, there's a matrix, right? So if you think about it, when we're looking at the matrix may actually make some of those decisions for us, and we may not need to designate certain amounts of money for one thing or the other, because one business could come to us and they could have this extremely compelling need that, you know, tops the charts on all of the scores on the matrices. And we could have another business that, you know, doesn't even score anything. And then that kind of resolves the issue where, you know, becomes a priority project and these other ones aren't as high up. But
Which
Dave-
document are you looking at? Sorry.
Oh, and the RFP, Mike, if you go a couple pages in, there's a chart.
The RFP draft Fitchburg?
Yeah, it's
Okay.
attachment A, City of Fitchburg ARPA criteria. It's what they use,
There it
not
is.
to
Sorry.
say,
Yep.
okay. So, all right. All right, so let's see here. So we talked about allowing businesses. It seems to be the consensus. Whether or not we have a cap on it, we have to come back to that. All right. Do we have any other non-municipal entity document pieces? David, do you have anything else to add of things that you think we should request people who aren't from the town as a town department to submit? We have financial statement here, the balance sheet, and profit loss and tax return. Is there anything else you can think of, David, that you'd want to see?
I think if they're a corporation, they should provide corporate officer information.
I think isn't that there? Is that listed? Or did it just say board of directors?
It does say board of directors, but I mean, we
Yeah,
can say,
It's
we can,
officers Also, yeah.
yeah, we can specify that it's just if it's a corporation, because I think a lot of the businesses, I'm guessing, David, without pulling things, I'm guessing the majority of businesses in town are simple DBAs.
Well, we got
So
the,
they
coun-
actually,
don't forget the country hen.
that's true. But as far as we know, they haven't requested money yet. So,
Well, that because they haven't had a chance to apply. I mean, the
Ah.
town diner is the one hopping up and down here. I think we should, I think.
I
one of
think Town Diner applied under the CARES Act.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, town diner is probably on the hunt is probably anxious to take advantage of any opportunity here.
Yeah, with a clearly defined published call, we're going to get more than one. There's absolutely going to be more.
all right. So we want to include list of board of directors for any incorporated business applying. Does that sound right to everyone?
That's fine.
Yeah, I wonder if we want to limit this to small businesses as the term is defined by the SBA. I think we do. I'm looking at the interim final rule here. Section 35.6 eligible uses.
What is the SBA number? Isn't it still pretty huge?
So 500 employees or less.
Do we have anything in town other than the school that employs more than 500 people right now?
Well, it depends. It's going to depend on how you count them, but I bet the country hen might. And I don't mean people working here in Hubbardston. It's employees regardless of where they're located.
Okay. All right. So then that would mean when we're saying who can apply, we would have to define business, and we could refer to the interim rule 35.6 and give the definition.
I think so. Yeah, I think so.
Just put in the Google real quick. It looks like it's 1,500 employees or 38.5 million.
Are you
That's a
sure?
large number.
Are you sure it's not 500? Because that's the number used in the interim final rule. In the definition of small business.
Well, I think we would go with the interim final rule anyway, because that's a governing document on this one.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we can look at that more closely, but in any event, I think we should use that definition.
Okay. All right, so we have the list of board of directors for incorporated pieces. We have added the definition up higher of who's eligible, including businesses per the interim rule of 35.6 definition. Do we feel like we want to include any of these other things? The authorized official certification, we already talked about the other two, the ADA non-discrimination, we said no go, seemed to be the consensus, but do we want to include authorized official certification for any business incorporation?
Well, Heather, unless it's required by the rule, I thought that was an open issue. We need to check to make sure
Okay.
that it isn't required.
Okay. All right, so I will check the rules. If it's included, I will throw it in the draft. Okay. All right, so unless there's anything else under the non-municipal entities, the next section down, which is just 3 bullets, talks about all applicants. So the all applicants thing, job descriptions of any staff funded through the proposed program, detailed project budget, outlining the sources, uses, and any matching funds that they may have, and detailed project schedule for all construction projects. A detailed project schedules requested. How does everyone feel about those 3 components?
Sounds good.
Yep.
Okay, in my mind, that would include any project that, a town department submits. So if Travis submits for, Travis or David or both of them submit for the road project, that would include them having to do, what's the project budget? How much are you asking us for? How much are you taking funds from somewhere else? And what's the project schedule? Because at the end of the day, all of these projects have to be completed no later than 12/31/26.
Well, I'm expecting that the application itself gets into quite a few weeds here on each of these 3 bullets. So
Okay,
that we can properly compare our proposals. Otherwise, if we just have these 3 bullets, we're going to get different narratives, and it isn't going to be very easy to compare them.
okay. I think we can make that happen. Any other thoughts? Okay, so then it lists out ineligible projects, and I believe this is all per the regulations of ARPA. Can't be used for federal matching requirements, premium pay that's unrelated to essential workers. So I think that's one of the reasons they have up there that you have to have job descriptions. It's going to be interesting to look up the interim rules relative to essential workers, because I know with the CARES Act and with everything with COVID in the first place, municipalities had a lot of discretion on who they defined as an essential employee. So it's going to be interesting to pull the interim rules and so forth and see if they have a more specific definition of who qualifies. Because I know in emailing with Ryan that he's interested in seeing a request for some more of the municipal employees to be entitled to some of that additional pay. But if it's only allowed for essential employees, the question is, whose definition of essential employee do we get to use? Do we get to use our liberal definition? Do we have to use a more restrictive definition that may exist in the interim rules? Okay. Premium, let's see, pensions and legal settlements, infrastructure is not directly addressed. Rainy day funds, financial reserves, outstanding debt, spending that occurs beyond December 31st, and things that are not authorized by the final rule. So I assume no one has any objections to those, since I think those are spelled out in the ARPA piece itself. Everyone's good with that?
Mhm.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so the next section, I don't think we need to spend any time on, it's just the ARPA state and local fiscal recovery funds overview. That's just the direct, same thing we kept reading over and over in the materials last week from all of them. outlining what it can be used for. The next section, which is I think where we need to spend our time here, is the local decision-making process. So in Fitchburg, they came up with what criteria they wanted to use to consider projects. And they listed them here. These are the same pieces of criteria that are listed in their matrix. That is that attachment A on the 3rd page of this, or the 4th page of this, I believe. So I think this is where we should spend some time and see if we agree with any of these things as important that we should continue and keep, or if there's anything else we should add. So I guess just going first, the first one they have here is tangible impact. Project has a large direct benefit to a majority of Fitchburg residents or businesses, which obviously would be Hubbardston residents or businesses. How does everyone feel about that being a criteria? Do we like that? Do we not like that? Do we think that will work for us? Do we think we should ex-nay it, change it?
Do we really want to dive into this before we've gotten guidance from Ryan?
Well, I think we need to come up with, some criteria of what we're looking at. And then I think we can most definitely send it to Ryan for his feedback. And also I would love to have at least an outline of some of these, the parts of the matrices piece so that we can send to the select board on Monday where they're meeting, and see if we can get them to take a look, see if they have any more thoughts or comments on it, and move forward with that. Because I think that's something that's we're gonna want to include in our RFP so people know what we're looking at before they even apply.
This is scoring, and I think these all make sense. My only question is, can we think of anything else we'd want to add to the decision criteria that isn't listed here?
Okay. Does anyone have any thoughts on that? David, do you have any thoughts on this?
I'm thinking, but I don't have a formal thought to articulate.
Okay.
I don't
Well,
either. These seem pretty complete. I just want to throw it out there to see if anybody can come up with anything else.
Okay. Well, I think we would just have to adjust the alignment piece because I don't think we have all those plans and projects that they reference. But I think we can throw in, the current master plan and any other pieces that we currently have, reports and so forth. I don't know if we have an open space plan, but any of those things we could throw in there to align it.
Just a point on the master plan. The master plan is pretty old at the moment. We have one that's currently under revision.
Okay. KP, do you have any thoughts on this?
No, not really. Nothing to add.
Okay. And Mike, any other thoughts?
I think this is a good starting point. Probably a good starting point for prioritizing where the funds are going to go.
Okay.
But I would like to hear more from Ryan as to what his goals are, so that I feel we're kind of in the dark right now.
Okay. All right. So Mike, we do have the email. I think it was part of last week's attachments, the email that Ryan had sent relevant to ARPA, where he was talking about the projects that he thought were relevant.
Let me see if I have that. I don't know if I do.
It would probably be hard copy.
Oh,
I don't have that handy.
Okay. I do have that. I can,
It's in the house.
yeah.
I'm not in the house. I'm out in my shed.
Wow. You have a really decked out shed there, Mike.
Yep. That's my home office. Has been for almost 9 years.
Would never have guessed you were in a shed.
Yep.
Fooled me.
Yep. It's heated and cooled.
There you go. So let me just see here. I'm pulling up the document from last week now. Do. Okay, where are we? Okay. So he had talked about, let's see, he had sent 2 emails on the ARPA piece. There was one, let's see. That's where he had talked about the Slade building and Lombard Road and town internet, but then there was a second one. Where did I put his second one?
Yeah, those are
Believe I
those are
tested.
projects with just names on them and large sums of money. Like town internet, $85,000, I think was the
Right.
number.
Right.
I don't know what that means, because does that mean $85,000 to run faster internet or more internet access? Or, I mean, I don't know. Without a breakdown, it's hard to comment.
Yes. And then the other email, it was part of the attachment. It was attachment D. Let's see, he wanted to make the request. So that was for the repair and restoration of Lombard Road through a strap. He said they tried for years for Lombard Road to apply for a strap grant, was not successful. So there's an email talking about that. While I know this would eat up most, if not all, the revenue replacement money ARPA, I think it's a long-term project worth solving. I thought there was a 3rd email from him, but maybe there was not. So that's what I have on that. All right,
Hey,
so
Mike,
you're
I
in.
think- Mike, I think when Ryan alludes to the town internet, and I won't speak for him, but there was a problem that we've discussed many times about the ability of the Slade building and the library to get internet access. And a lot of times when we're all in a meeting together and we all have our laptops, the system can't accommodate us all to be on the internet at the same time in the building. So, you know, we've discussed many times how to improve that. And after many attempts, we found out that it's going to need some major infrastructure retooling to be able to get internet across those buildings for multiple users to be on it at the same time. And it was a costly proposition to do that, and it required some additional infrastructure that wasn't existing today. So that may be what he's referring to the $85,000 for there.
Okay, I just questioned that it needs to be 85,000. I think it could be much less, but that's not for this meeting.
Okay, so what I can definitely do, Mike, is after last meeting, I did send Ryan a page-long update on how the meeting went and kind of an abbreviated version of the notes before they happened for the minutes. So
Yep.
I can send him, we're recording tonight's meeting. So I can most certainly send him, or just let him know to access it, because he has access to the Zoom account. So he can watch tonight's meeting, and then we can also send him whatever we end up with for a draft document, so he can take a look at the priorities and see if those line up, and then see if he has any other thoughts for, you know, what his view is. And I mean, maybe that's one of the things we add here, which is we can add it, maybe part of the alignment piece is, does it align with the town administrator / select board's goals for the town? And maybe we can cover it that way. That way, you know, things that both Ryan, David, and the select board think are most important, they have more weight to them. And it
Right.
shows up in the matrix.
But the applicant isn't going to know what those are.
We
I mean,
can always attach a list. I
Well,
think that's what Fitchburg did.
Well, I think, well, if, yeah, I mean, if we don't have specific strategic plans in, for example, a master plan or anything else that is already available for the applicant to, you know, to fish out and understand, we're going to have to document it someplace.
Okay.
Well,
All right.
Ryan and I spent a little bit of time this afternoon talking about the overall vision. I know that the Capital Improvement Planning Committee is coming to the select board on Monday night to get direction as to where we're going to go with respect to public safety complex, Slade, Lombard Road, and other upgrades that we could do with once in a lifetime funding available. And the interest rates at historic lows. So I think the picture would probably be clearer after Monday's meeting.
Okay. That makes sense. And then one of the things we do, one of the criteria here is actually the last one, which I like a lot, which is transformative change, that the project would not be possible without ARPA funds. And when you get to the matrix, which is the next page, it actually gives, you know, either 0 points to a project or 3 points to a project based on whether or not you could do this with other funds. So like something like Lombard Road, if you can't use any other funds for, this says this makes it happen. This would allow it to happen, so to speak. So, all right, any other criteria to consider adding here? All right, hearing nothing, moving on. So the next piece is just how to submit applications and materials. I think we need to make sure we have an application before we can have a deadline of when this comes back. And then the last piece is just RFP technical assistance, which we could update with David's information or Tony's information as needed. And then the next page where I wanted to spend a few minutes is the attachment A, City of Fitchburg ARPA criteria. Does everyone have that?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, so that we have the eligibility, timeliness, project must answer yes to the 2 questions to proceed so that it's actually eligible under the interim rule, final rule criteria, and that the funds will be expended by December 31st, 26. And then it talks about each of those criteria we talked about, and that's where they do the 0 to 3 system on each of those pieces. Did everyone get a chance to look at this, or is this everyone just taking a peek now at this? It's possible. This is a big packet.
No, I looked at it.
Okay. Does anyone have any thoughts on this chart? Do we like this chart? Do we hate this chart? Do we think
I
we
thought
could
we were-
utilize this?
I thought we were just talking about this chart.
We just weren't
Okay.
talking about the very detailed 0 to 3 part,
Oh, okay.
Susan. Now we're in the nitty gritty.
Oh, all right. So now we're talking about the scoring itself.
Which document again? I'm sorry.
It's attachment A, City of Fitchburg ARPA criteria, Mike.
Okay.
It's the next page. It's the chart.
Yeah.
Or as I like to refer to it as the matrices or the matrix.
Okay.
I guess it's just the matrix because it's not plural. KP, what do you think of this?
I don't see it.
You don't see it?
Here, I'll share it. Oh. No, we won't.
All right, Mike, hold on. Let me give you permission. Let's see. Shh. Okay. All right, I just made you the host for the moment, so you should be able to share.
Yep. Here you go.
Okay. So these are the same topics we just covered with the criteria. They're just scored 0 to 3, and they have specific lingo of how to judge whether something falls in that piece or not. Mike, how do you feel about these?
I think they're pretty straightforward and is a good place to start discussions.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. David, do you have any thoughts on the matrix? David, you there?
Yep, I'm reviewing it.
Oh, sorry.
All right. Yeah, I think the alignment column needs to be massaged a little bit, considering I don't think we have a strategic plan for the town. We have capital plans, we have road plans, we have a master plan under development.
Agreed.
Okay. Well, maybe after Monday night, we can have a town strategic goals for 2022 plan.
Yeah.
To add. Okay. Now, what about, I guess the one I have a question on for folks is, how do you guys feel about the ROI column, which refers to leveraging? Project leverages a greater than 1-to-1 matching funds ratio to expand impact of ARPA funds. The only thing I worry about in that category is that it might be confusing to people.
I think we can write it to explain it, but I think it's
Okay.
useful.
Okay. Okay. All right. So does anyone else have any other thoughts about this matrix? Anything we should add, anything we should subtract or do other than the alignment category that needs some massaging?
Well, it is very town focused, not necessarily, say, business focused. So back to the earlier discussion around businesses. So like if you look at the decision criteria under number 0, project has no tangible impact on Hubbardston residents or businesses or small. It's really talking about the impact to the resident or business. I mean, giving 20K to Hub Diner, what is the impact to the community? Right?
Okay.
I'm just using that as an example. I don't really want to yay or nay on it. It's just as an example.
The community is either the residents or the business. I mean, the 20K to the Hub Diner, assuming, I don't know who their employees are, but I would expect, depending on their financial statements, we could figure out whether 20, to use the example, whether 20,000 is a drop in the bucket or is super meaningful to them.
Yeah, I guess the part I'm struggling here with is that this matrix doesn't seem to be written with the overall impact of the pandemic. It's really more about, here's a chunk of money, go do with it what you think you can, as opposed to offsetting. The matrix is not written to say offset a COVID related.
Well, that's the grading question is whether the project is eligible. That's the answer to your question.
Right.
And then after that, now we look at all of these other criteria. Okay.
All right.
And our application might go into more detail to help the applicant figure out whether or not it's eligible, rather than just, making them answer the question, which they won't know. So we might guide them in that direction.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So I think, go ahead.
It seems to me that a business is still gonna be able to talk about community impact and those things, because like if we were talking about a place where, yeah, they had revenue, but they didn't employ anybody who worked in town, that's a difference in community impact. And being able to say, yeah, this is a place that's a meeting point for people and weekend mornings, or there's 3 or 4 people employed, or there's 15 or 20. It's a very different metric from, yeah, we make money, but we don't employ anybody other than ourselves. So there's definitely still something there that can be measured.
Well, I think, yes, and I think going to the column of community need, if I recall correctly from the interim final rule, they're speaking about different populations that were disproportionately affected, whether they're measured by economic status or some other or a more immutable criteria. But there were specific populations that were identified, and that may or may not be relevant to Hubbardston. I mean, for example, this qualified census tracts, I don't think we have any of that here. So, you know, some of these types of community needs just might not be applicable to Hubbardston.
Yep.
Okay. All right, so we've covered the request for proposal document. I think we have some things we can amend to it and get it a little bit more workable. Is everyone comfortable with sharing the criteria with the select board on Monday to see how they feel about that and if they're on board with that being the plan?
I am. Are we looking for guidance from them as to what they would prefer, or just
Well,
sharing it?
Well, I think, you know, what I have in mind is that we would present, you know, David and I would work to update this chart to reflect our comments tonight, and obviously get Fitchburg out of that before it confuses everybody.
Sure.
See if we can work the language on the ROI piece and the alignment part, send it to Ryan as well and see if he has any thoughts on it, but then get it to the select board and say, you know, this is what we're thinking, you know, we're putting together an RFP. We use Fitchburg as the basis. We're looking at, you know, criteria to be able to communicate to people who are applying. This is what we're going to consider. Do you guys have any thoughts or input or anything that you don't like that you'd like us to amend?
Are they going to be able to decide that on the spot?
If they get the document ahead of time, I think they will. Chris, our KP?
Yeah, if we can get the document, if you can get a Hubbardston specific draft completed and sent out sometime soon, and we can review it beforehand, I'm sure we can come to a consensus on Monday.
Yeah. So, and then I think, you know, to David's point, since Capital and the Select Board are both meeting jointly on Monday, I think it gives everyone an opportunity to see if we can put together kind of that strategic goal plan for at least the next couple of years of those large projects, as well as,
Yep.
you know, touching or reaching out rather to Ryan to get his input on any strategic direction. But I think David will probably reflect that over to the select board and Capital on Monday as well. So, all right,
Okay.
so we have this document that looks good there. I don't know is everyone comfortable with holding off to come up with a due date so we can first finalize this project and make sure we get the application ready and then we decide on a due date, so we don't put the cart before the horse on this one?
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so we'll do that. David did send us a draft application. I think what might make the most sense is everyone to take a look at it and see if you have any thoughts. And if anyone has any thoughts, either send them to David or I, and we can incorporate them in a draft with the group to review at the next meeting. So you can take a little bit further on this, because I think some parts of the application he put forward, I think, are excellent. I think some things you might want to think about whether we actually need them and if we want to change them. And I know for myself, I'd like to see a little bit more specific piece as to how it ties into the funding we have, where it goes back to, are you just requesting, you know, our miscellaneous funding, or are you requesting one of the specific categories and which one? So that we know where it falls. Does that sound workable to everyone? So we would present, between myself and Chris, we would report back to the full select board on Monday, give them, you know, make sure they have the copy of the draft request for proposal based on what we discussed tonight. And after Ryan sees it, and gives any comments, David and I would get that to the select board. And then as a group, we would meet next week, or if everyone's available again, to go over the application and to finalize hopefully the due date, where to post, and get these things moving.
Sure.
Yep.
So just logistically speaking, we're going to be posting the select board tomorrow. Do you think that you and I, Heather, can come up with the RFP draft by tomorrow afternoon at the latest?
I think so. I think I can play with this in the morning and send it over to you, David, if that
Okay.
works for you by noontime.
Yep.
I'll put a strict deadline on my end.
Unrelated question, is the select board meeting virtual or in person?
Right now it's in person.
Okay.
I'm starting to get the high sign about dinner, and we are past the top of the hour. Do we want?
We
to-
are. We went over by 3 minutes, Mike, although I think we
Yep.
started at 6:03, so we're pretty much on par.
Do we want to schedule another meeting?
I think we do. How's everyone feel about next Wednesday? Is that doable for everyone? Same time, same place?
Yes.
No, that
KP?
doesn't work.
No, that's the every other Wednesday piece for you, isn't it?
Correct.
Okay. Do we want to skip next week and go to the week after and try to get some correspondence, where I send out the application to everybody, and if you have feedback, you get it back to David or I, and hopefully we'll have a more complete packet for everyone if we wait 2 weeks?
That sounds good.
Works for
Yeah.
me.
Works for me.
Okay. So I don't know if anyone has a calendar in front of them, what that date is.
That's the 19th.
Okay. So January 19th at 6 o'clock.
Yeah,
And we'll plan on Zoom again unless, things calm down a bit before then.
sounds good.
All right. Does anyone have any other matters that we did not document that they want to bring up?
No,
Will we be
Mike?
using the same, will we be using the same Zoom link?
I don't know, Mike, but I'll send it out like I did this time.
Okay, all right,
So you'll have whatever it is.
I'm all
All
set.
right. Okay. KP, did you have anything?
I have nothing.
Okay. Chris, did you have anything?
Well, actually, for scheduling, I think the EDC meets that night. So I don't know if more than one board can use the Zoom link at a time. We'll want to look into that.
I don't think we can, but I know Lori was suggesting that she was going to look at talk to Ryan and David about getting a second account.
Yeah, I think I gave her the green light on that.
Okay. So we should be okay. All right. So with that being said, do I have a motion to adjourn?
Well, we should be okay if it's up and running. We need to make sure it's up and running, and she did indeed get a second account.
Well, we have 2 weeks to circle back on that, KP. So we'll make sure that we do.
Can you make sure that exists out there, David?
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
so moved.
Second,
All right. So I have a motion to adjourn by Susan, seconded by Mike. All in favor, roll call. Susan,
Yes.
Mike,
yes.
KP,
Yes.
Christopher. And Heather,
Yes.
yes. Okay. All right. So we're adjourned 7:06. Thank you very much. We'll see you in 2 weeks.
Have a
Thank
good
you.
night.
Good night,
All right.
everyone.
Good
Bye-bye.
night.